Welcome guys to another OrmsTV video, and we ending 2023 off with a bang.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is we are going to take you on a bit of a journey. We're going to run you through what the big brands released this year, or at least the stuff that they released that we actually thought was pretty cool and is worth having a chat about. And then more specifically, we're going to talk about our wish list for 2024, what we think are going to come out. Now, we did a similar video to this last year, and it was pretty wrong. Most of the stuff didn't come out.
There's some, right? There was some.
Some of it was right, but the big predictions were predominantly wrong. But this year we are going to get it right. So join us.
Yeah, grab a drink and sit and have some fun with us.
Now let's kick this chat off with probably the biggest brand in the camera industry right now, Canon. Now, Canon actually had a bumper year. They released a lot of good stuff, some not so good, but for the most part, it was pretty positive, right?
One of the big releases for Canon for me this year was definitely that big white lens they launched, the RF 100 to 300 2.8. And I mean, we pushed that lens to the limit when we went and we shot indoor go-karting, super low light, and that was with an R6 II, if I remember right.
Yeah, sounds about right. A really incredible lens,
Yeah.
and something that no one else is doing at the moment. And I think that's not the only thing that Canon did this year that was kind of a little bit unique, but it was one of those first kickoffs for the year that really kind of set them apart. I was lucky enough to use that lens at the Samola Hill climb as well. Absolute monster of a lens. And it kind of feeds nicely into the other lens that they launched, which was a standout for me, was that RF 200 to 800. Like, really unique, pretty much the only variable 800 on the market at the moment. Such a good lens.
Yeah.
And for an 800, relatively affordable.
And also quite small, actually,
Yeah.
because a lot of competitors brought out 600mm zooms, and Canon was like, nah, we're doing 800.
Exactly. And they still managed to keep it nice and small, keep it tight, keep it a usable form factor. I absolutely love that lens. Really, really solid lens.
Now, if we talk about cameras, there was one or two that kind of stood out, more on the entry-level side of things. I mean, the R50 is kind of like those sort of range of cameras that people like starting out photography or hobbyists will get into. So that was quite a successful camera. Like R50 was pumping.
Absolutely. The R50, once they brought the price in line, it was a phenomenal choice at that price point. The other camera they released, though, in that entry-level line, maybe not so successful, the R100, had a couple of misses in there. No touch screen, no articulating screen on that. Maybe not my favorite unit, but I kind of see where they were going with it. And I get the notion of trying to bring a camera out in South Africa, sub 10,000 Rand price point. Kind of made sense.
So if we jump to something in the more professional range of things, looking at the R8 full frame camera, it gives you C-Log 3. That was quite great to see for Canon to get in that sort of more affordable price range of filmmaking guys.
Yeah, so pretty much the only full frame camera that they released this year. And unfortunately, not as successful as I would have thought it would be. The price is just about right on it, maybe a little bit too expensive in some markets. Yeah, I can sort of see that. But I think the bigger issue is their choice of battery.
For sure.
It's completely wrong. So immediately it's not really usable as a second cam to someone who's shooting with an R6 II or R5 as like their first choice. Just missing that little bit of specialness. But where they did give some specialness, though, is with that 10 to 20 lens that they launched.
Yeah, the rectal linear lens.
Yeah.
And that lens gives you crazy good barrel distortion. It just corrects everything straight.
Yeah, it's such a phenomenal lens, and kind of like a spiritual successor to one of their amazing previous like EF lenses.
It's 1124.
Indeed, yeah. Absolutely insane lens, like really niche, like definitely not a lens for everybody. But man, if you have that lens in your kit and you pull it out like on special occasions when you just want to shoot that, so
Amazing.
good, such a good lens. So now that we've chatted about the things that Canon released in 2023, it is only fitting that we mention our wish list, what we think Canon is going to do in 2024.
Yeah, and every year we kind of see this trend of video becoming more and more and more popular, and the demand for video creators specifically becoming more and more popular. And I think Canon is going to launch a lot of cameras and lenses that are going to suit these new, bright, and amazing people in that industry quite well.
Yeah, so we predicted last year that Canon was going to kind of do something to take on Sony in that kind of very video-centric market, and they didn't. Unfortunately, we got it completely wrong. But this year, though, this year, I think, is going to be the one, okay? In 2024, because there was some patents filed and very clearly a little sort of compact cinema-ish style camera. You know, so think like an R5C, but smaller.
Okay.
And without a viewfinder on. It is such a good move for Canon to enter into that space, to come out with something that caters to people who do content creation, or even more serious cinema type of work, but giving something at a more affordable price point and giving that performance without having to go out and spend crazy money, you know, to get a, you know, a real sort of cinema style camera. And right now, that little space is absolutely dominated by Sony, and someone has to fight them. And if that someone is Canon, and it pushes Sony to do better and Canon does better, I'm all for it. I would love to see something like that happen.
Now, you just mentioned off camera that there might be a possible 70 to 200 that might be coming as well.
Yeah, so in kind of like the same patent filing dump where they're kind of like compact, small cinema cameras mentioned in, they also filed for a RF mounted 70 to 200, but with the focal control all internal.
Now, even though video is taking over and there's a huge new market and it's growing and all those good things, Canon has not forgotten about their like OG photographers, you know, and there's two models that we kind of know has been talked about so much. Everybody kind of knows it's coming, especially with the Olympics next year, you know, and that would be the obvious Canon R1 that everybody has been waiting for.
I think it's a given that it's going to come. Like, let's just assume that it is going to arrive 100%.
Okay.
What's more interesting to me is what features it might have. And I have one that I think is going to be there, but I'd like to know what you think is going to be sitting in there.
It's going to be a high megapixel camera for sure.
Okay.
You know, but how high? Probably maybe in the 70, 80 bracket, more or less.
Okay.
Right. I don't think Canon is doing the global shutter like Sony is doing.
No. Yeah.
I don't think they're going that route, and people are probably going to rage about it and like be weird about it. But what more can you push out of these cameras? You know, like I'm curious to know what setting you think.
Yeah.
What
so
feature?
I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be global shutter on that camera, but I do think that Canon will amp up the processing power to such an extent that the readout will be fast enough that you don't really notice that rolling shutter effect, especially if they're going to tout this as like the ultimate sports, wildlife, tracking subject, you know, that kind of thing. I think we are going to see maybe something that pushes 40, maybe 50 frames per second at a relatively high megapixel. I have no idea what that'll be. If it's going to be 60, 70, 80, I don't know. But I did come across a little piece of information that Canon discussed at a meeting, you know, in a boardroom somewhere in the back corners of Canon HQ. And you know, right now, what their autofocus technology is based on is dual pixel autofocus, okay? Now, this technology that's rumored to be with Canon is quad pixel autofocus, okay? So 4 photodiodes on every single picture. So every single picture that's taken in every single pixel will have 4 different angles allowing to nail focus. And if they go there and they have the processing power to make that work on a high megapixel sensor, the autofocus, which for me, Canon pretty much has the best one out there right now as it is. It's, you know, Sony's very close with their AI autofocus, but Canon's autofocus is so natural and it's so easy. And if they bump that up yet another level, go to a quad pixel autofocus system, I mean, like my brain can't even comprehend how fast and how accurate that will be.
Now, another camera that's been rumored to be replaced, and a lot of people are kind of sort of catching on and seeing what other brands are doing, is the R5 Mark II.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely due for an upgrade. I think there's a lot of video features and stable video features that Canon will need to bring to this new model, especially for long format recording, no heat issues, like have some kind of heat management in the camera.
Yeah, so on the R5, I'm going to lean a little bit different to you on this one. I think that they are going to turn the R5 into their high megapixel kind of studio setup camera, very dedicated to photographers.
The Mark II.
The Mark II, yeah.
Okay.
So the R5 as it stands right now is the highest megapixel camera in their lineup, right? And I think they're going to take that further. If the R1 comes out and it sits at 60 or 70 megapixels, I think we are going to see that stacked high megapixel sensor that they've been showing off at trade shows since like 2015.
Yeah.
Okay. That ultra high megapixel, I'm going to say 100 megapixel camera. Okay. Bring it out. No one else has it. To get 100 megapixels, you have to go medium format at the moment. Okay. And I think Canon has that up their sleeves. I think they have a 100 megapixel sensor, and we're going to see it in the R5 too.
I agree and disagree, Deon. I think they are going to go high megapixel with the R5 Mark II, but with the initial split between the R5 and the R5C, I think it was a bit of an afterthought. So now I think with the R5 Mark II and the R5C Mark II, they're going to sort of redefine that split even more so, and they're going to go full on cinema camera with the R5C2, and then the R5 II, yes, it's probably going to be that very high megapixel studio-centric sort of stills camera.
So that was Matt, our videographer, that just had to have a quick feature in our video, seeing that this is going to be, you know, it's like a send-off for him, you know?
It is a bit of a send-off for him. Unfortunately, we are losing Matt at the end of this year, but he is on to bigger and better things.
For sure.
And we'll have a new Matt.
Yeah.
I don't know what his name is yet, but he'll be in these videos, I'm sure.
So on that note of bigger and better things, let's go to Sony. They had a couple of cool releases this year, a couple of weird ones as well.
Yep.
You know, I mean, the first camera that pops into my head is the A6700. That was like a huge camera that was overdue for an upgrade. I think it was a 6600 or 6500.
Yeah. Like a phenomenal little camera.
Yeah.
Incredible video specs in it. Great stills performance. Obviously, Sony's autofocus system in there doing its job. Just a long overdue system update, and brought that whole kind of APS-C system of Sony right back up to date. I love that little camera. It's such a good little camera. But when you mentioned Sony the first time, the first thing that actually popped into my head was that ZV-E1.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was weird when it first came out. I didn't quite understand it. I thought it was a bit odd. But the more we played with it and the more we shot with it, the more I grew to really like that thing.
Now, if we do go to some lenses, we just shot with it actually the other day. I don't even think the video is out yet. I'm just checking now, it's not out yet.
Yeah.
And that was the 300mm f2.8. And it's such a tiny lens, so light. It is crazy sharp. You can pop on extenders onto it, and it's just a good lens.
Yeah, incredible lens. At the time when we filmed it, I thought it was a bit strange. I didn't quite like the focal length, but the more we spoke about it, the more we shot with it, so good. It's such a good lens. It's exactly what we want from, you know, from the Sony guys. We got some other, units out there as well. We got some updates. We got that new 16 to 35 out there as well. Like,
Always good.
yeah, like I almost couldn't understand when they brought out an updated version, because the GM1 was already such a phenomenal lens, and this just pushes it a little bit further. Better sharpness in the corners, better edge to edge. So good. Like they just keep bringing out the good stuff.
And another funky one was the 70 to 200 f4 version 2, because it actually had like a proper macro built into it. So it's a great lens, a great versatile lens for close-up photography, and also just a little bit of mid-range to long-range shooting.
100%. Like I always maintain that 70 to 200 f4s are kind of underrepresented, because there's always like incredibly sharp. They're relatively affordable. They're a lot smaller and lighter than the 2.8 equivalents. I've always had a soft spot for that 70-200 f4, and Sony just nailed it right out of the gate with that lens.
So that was 2023. I mean, if we look at 2024 and our wish list,
Yes.
I think something that has to come is, of course, the A7S new one.
Yes.
Either it being a version 4 or whatever it's going to be called. But yeah, there needs to be an update to the S range.
Yeah, so the S has been out for, going on almost 4 years now. So definitely time for an update. And I'd be very interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah.
Because realistically, the S has always been that kind of lower megapixel, low light beast, absolute monster of a video camera, essentially, that just happens to look like every other mirrorless camera on the market. And I don't think they're going to mess with that system.
Yeah.
I think they're going to maintain that. We'll
That
probably,
formula.
100%. We'll probably see a bit of a bump in megapixel. I'd venture maybe at most like 20 megapixel out of it, so that it can shoot 6K. That could be an absolute monster, a monster of a camera.
So we did mention, or we spoke about the Olympics coming soon to 2024, and that might also push another model coming up from the Sony ranks.
Yeah.
And it's also a camera that's been in there sort of on their shelf for like quite a while, the A1.
Yeah.
You know? And A1 too, I mean, what more can you bring out of those kind of cameras, you know?
I would hate to be the guy to have to kind of go in and design what the A12 or the A2 or whatever they're going to call it is going to be. Because realistically, you're going to have to rank up the megapixels. Okay, so you're going to be pushing it, what is it at the moment, like it's 60 odd, so
50, isn't it?
50, okay. So they're going to have to push it up to 60 or 70. They're going to have to increase the speed again, because it's no longer the fastest camera out there. They're going to have to push all of their video tech into it, because that's kind of what the A1 was. It was this camera that could just do absolutely everything, and it did it so well. And man, like to have to follow that thing up. So I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but if they do replace the A7S III and they come out with that A7S4, I think it's only right to, at the exact same time, replace the FX3.
Exact same time would be
100%.
a good option.
Yeah, the exact same time. So nobody's waiting to see what the FX3 Mark II is going to be. The people who want that kind of dual purpose goes A7S.
Yeah.
Everybody who wants dedicated cine style shooting, go FX3 Mark II. Done, out of the way, same specs across the board, just viewfinder in one and cool cinema body in the other one. And while we're on cinema bodies, there's a rumor doing the rounds that there might be a Sony FX50. Now, FX50, when I first heard it, I kind of thought, okay, so below the FX30, but apparently not. Apparently, a Super 35 sensor version of the FX6. So that kind of like bigger, more cine style body, but with a smaller sensor, so you can adapt more lenses onto it. Kind of makes sense to me. Kind of fits into the lineup.
Now, when you look at Sony's lens lineup, they're constantly filling the gaps where it needs to be filled. But the only gap that I kind of see in their lineup is sort of affordable big zoom lenses.
Yeah.
Either it being crop sensor and or also full frame compatible. Because if you do look at, let's say, Canon RF, they've got affordable big zoom lenses for
Yep.
people that want to shoot wildlife, but then they also have the pro lineup. And in Sony, you don't really see that sort of versatility.
Absolutely.
If you're a Sony shooter, you're kind of forced to go to Tamron or sort of Sigma. And I think that's where Sony can fill in the gap a little bit.
It absolutely makes sense. You know, they've got the kind of like the slightly odd primes. They've got the ultra high-end super telephotos. Fill that middle. They'll do very, very well for them. Other than that, though, I don't actually have any rumors about Sony lenses. I don't know about you. They're going to bring out some lenses. It'll be good.
Yeah.
Some of them will say G Master on it. Yeah.
Some will just be G.
Some will just be G, yeah. They'll also be good. So, yeah, that's Sony. Okay, I think I'm ready for Nikon now. So, what did Nikon bring out this year?
So at the moment, when you say Nikon, think Nikon, see Nikon on a little magazine script or something, the only product that pops into my head is that beautiful Z8 they launched.
Technically last year, but considering that we only got it this year, we're going to
Yeah.
count it as this year.
Yeah.
And we're going to give Nikon that win. And also at the same time, I am declaring that the Nikon Z8 is my camera of the year this year.
I would second that.
Damn, it's a good camera.
Yeah. It's
And it's
probably
so
the
good.
only camera ever from Nikon that I've really had a lot of fun with, but legit.
It is. It is
legit.
It is so good. It is might be one of the best all-round cameras
Yeah.
on the market right now. And yes, we know technically it was released last year, but we're counting it as this year. The other camera that they brought out this year was that ZF.
Yeah, the interesting one. We were kind of worried that it was going to be sort of a plastic dinky kind of
Yes,
body, but
yes.
luckily not. It has a really sort of old school metal feel to
so
it.
good.
It's a good weight to the camera body as well.
Yeah, my expectations were nowhere, but Nikon blew it out of the water. I love how
Yeah.
that thing feels. It feels so good.
Lens-wise, something that is more sort of in the mid-range, the 70 to 180 was a really cool lens they launched because it still had very good performance
Yeah.
at a slightly sort of sacrifice at the build quality of the lens.
It's fair.
But in terms of optics, it's so sharp, it's so good, it's so well priced as well. So it gives you that sort of 70 to 200S experience, but at like literally half the price.
And I'm going to follow that up by mentioning which was probably my favorite lens of the year, and that's the 180 to 600. I only got to try it very late in the year. Matt and I went and we shot Red Bull King of the Air. Man, such a good lens.
Yeah. The images
So
looked
good.
amazing that you guys shot at that
Yeah,
day.
like such a good lens. It's not in their S lineup. You know, I was expecting a little bit of a sacrifice in the optical performance, but it absolutely nails it. And it's relatively affordable. It's so much lens for the money. I love that thing. I think it's a great offering from them.
So that was the 2023 recap, right? Now, if we look at 2024 Nikon and we sort of click on our wish list, there's a lot Nikon needs to update.
There
you know?
is, it's pretty much
There's a
the
lot.
whole lineup.
There's
Yeah.
their whole middle slash
Yeah.
almost pro range needs
Yeah.
an update, and hopefully we will see all that Z8 technology trickle down, especially to their newer full frame bodies that everybody is waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say that it is pretty much a foregone conclusion that this year Nikon will release a Z6 III and a Z7 III. And I think let's start there. Yes, it has to take Z8, Z9 technology and bring it down into that lineup. I'm not saying Z8, Z9 sensor, but autofocus system, processing units. For the Z6, I don't think they're going to go high megapixels. I'm probably thinking like a 24, maybe a 30 megapixel sensor at most in that unit. That's kind of where I'm expecting them to aim it. Bump up the video features a little bit, probably give us like 6K RAW. I'd be very interested to see though what they do with the Z7. Because It's very close to where the Z8 is. Okay, right now you're looking at megapixels, that kind of thing. It's an awfully, awfully close camera. And I think they have to be a little bit careful there. But they could pull that trick where they make the Z7 kind of like the high megapixel focused on stills camera.
Yeah.
And I really hope they do that because they have the all-rounder. They have the Z8.
Yeah.
They have the more video-centric unit in the Z6. So yeah, go megapixel on that thing. Your lenses can handle it. Go all the way. I would love to see that happen. I'm going to throw a curveball in there. I think they are going to do potentially a Z9 or a Z8H.
Which is interesting. When you said it first, I was like, what? Why would they do that? And then when you explained, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, so in my mind, an H variant of either the Z9 or the Z8, kind of doing that high-speed version of the camera. In my mind, it kind of makes sense for Nikon because they don't really play in that bracket at the moment. So now that we've covered the big three, Canon's out of the way, Sony's out of the way, Nikon's out of the way, I think it's time for a lightning round. Everybody who's left, what did they do? What are they going to do? Let's start with Fuji.
Yeah, so Fuji launched the GFX 100 version 2.
Yep.
And we actually really enjoyed it. It's super fast, really good video performance.
Yep.
The autofocus, which was a problem with the first gen model, massive upgrade. So that's a huge win for Fuji.
Yeah, so I think, just a little rumor that I heard in the grapevine, they're gonna do another GFX model, okay, called the GFX 25.
Okay.
Now in the GFX lineup, the number always references the megapixel count on these cameras. So GFX 50, GFX 100. A GFX 25 is very low megapixel for a medium format sensor. But think of the video potential that you might have in that. We already saw that video inkling in the GFX 100 Mark II.
Yep.
But there's one camera from Fuji that I would be far more interested to see.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be the X200V.
Or X100 V2 or
Yeah.
X100 Z or whatever they end up calling it.
The camera that's caused so much craze that every smartphone photographer in the world wants to buy one.
Yeah, the affordable Leica Q3.
Yes. And it is a flippin' good camera.
It is absolutely incredible. They have to do a new one, even if it is just to have easier access to parts and manufacturing than what they have right now, and actually have some stock available for people to purchase. I would be over the moon with a new X100.
Now, seeing that you did mention the Leica Q3, going to a brand that is sort of close to your heart, you know, seeing that you are a Leica connoisseur and you dabble into the Leica system every now and then.
I think the word you're looking for is fanboy.
Yeah.
Unashamedly a fanboy. But yes, so this year they did the Q3, probably the most notable release that they did this year. There was a little bit of a variant on the M11 as well, the M11P, that did some interesting things. And yeah, like the autofocus system that we saw on that Q3.
Massive bump up.
A huge improvement. And what are we going to see in 2024? We're going to see an SL3. No two ways around it. So on the SL3, everything points towards them using, finally, a phase detect autofocus system. And I think that could be exactly what the SL system needs. Bump up in autofocus, okay? Everything else as well. Yes, give us more megapixels, you know, give us the sensor out of the M11, you know, give us that kind of Leica ecosystem that we all want. But give us that autofocus, okay? Give us some usable, everyday, real-world autofocus. Because let's be honest, the contrast detect in the SL2 just wasn't good enough.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, like, yeah, if the subject is stationary, phenomenal, it locks, like, it nails it. But there's no tracking functionality in it, you know? Give us that. And I think if they do that and they nail it and they stick to kind of their core values, I think the SL3 and the SL3S will be phenomenal cameras. And yes, maybe 1% of the global population can afford it. So be it. As long as it's a good camera and it looks good and it feels good, I'm there all day, every day.
Now, we haven't mentioned all camera manufacturers out there, but you know, these guys like GoPro and DJI, they'll launch their drones, they'll launch their new Euro 14, and you know, we know that's gonna happen. So we kind of left that to your imagination.
Yeah, spoiler alert, new GoPro, September 2024.
Every year.
Every year,
On the
absolutely.
date.
Yeah. And nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know, they have to do what they have to do. But I don't think it's necessary for us to talk about that. What I would like to say is that this has been it's been a very interesting year in the camera industry. I think it's been a very positive year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you are a photographer or a videographer or a bit of both, a content creator, whatever it is that you do, I don't think ever in the history of this imaging medium that we love, have you ever been as spoiled for choice as you are right now. We live in an age where the technology is progressing so quickly. You know, there's new features coming out almost daily, it feels like. Like this year, just as an example, there was new stuff the whole time. There was interesting stuff all the time.
AI came to the surface.
Exactly. Like, if this is what 2023 brought, imagine what's going to happen next year, and the year after that, and the one after that. Like, if you already can't make up your mind what's the right camera to buy, next year is not going to help at all. But man, it's exciting. And I'm so lucky to be here for it, man. Oh,
Cheers to
good.
2023.
Indeed.